Washington Park, just south of Chicago in Homewood, Illinois, scene of the race of the century. Executive Director Benjamin F. Lindheimer, whose list of contributions to American racing is long and of extreme value, caps them all, bringing together possibly the two greatest three-year-olds ever to grace the American turf in a single year of racing. Swaps versus Nashua. We're looking now at the stable area of watching the champion of the East comes to the scene of his greatest battle date. Nashua, who is Arlington Classic at Washington Park's sister track, Arlington Park in Arlington Heights, Illinois, has been freshened up at Saratoga. He has been given a rest and brought back into top shape. And as he steps from the horse Pullman, it is readily seen that the rest has been of great value to Nashua. His coat is sleek and shiny. His well-muscled body stands out in bold relief. And he looks like Mr. Woodward, his owner, Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, his trainer, said he would, in tip-top shape to meet his greatest rival. No chances are taken with this mighty champion from the East. Nashua is guided into a horse van to be driven from the railroad siding to Barn A, where just up the line from his rival Swaps, he will be stabled until the moment of their epical meeting. As the van rolls to a halt, newspaper photographers and newsreel cameramen gather around the open door to keep the public across the country and indeed around the world wherever races are run well informed on every step of this all-important journey from Saratoga to Washington Park, and to satisfy the needs of newspapers and newsreel theaters all around the country. Nashua is slowly walked around so that yet more pictures can be taken. And this is Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, 81 years old, who can look back on a record that shows a galaxy of thoroughbred stars who have risen to greatness under his handling, and who says that this is the greatest moment of all. He rarely travels anymore, but he came all the way to Washington Park for this great event because this is a race he wouldn't miss. And here is the horse he must beat. Swaps, the champion of California, conqueror of Nashua in the Kentucky Derby. That Kentucky Derby was the only meeting of Swaps and Nashua, and their records have been so completely successful since that meeting that literally by public demand, these two great horses have been called upon to meet again. They are meeting on a neutral ground here at Washington Park, where Swaps has already shown one success, galloping to a sensational victory over the grass in the American Derby. And now with exercise boy Chester White in the irons, Swaps moves out onto the track for a long stretching gallop. For the hard work is behind them. And these two horses, Swaps and Nashua, will be galloped slowly in long stretching works just to keep the fine edge of condition that they have brought now to the eve of the great race. The Ellsworth family, Rex Ellsworth, the owner of Swaps, watches from the sideline, and they are very pleased with what they see as this grand chestnut colt from California takes his easy gallop around the track and then comes back to his stall to be rubbed down, sponged, fed, and put away for another long, and for these people, Miss Tenney, his trainer, Rex Ellsworth, the owner, another anxious day of waiting. And here is the aged Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, bent with 81 years of rich racing experience, but still walking the track, as he comes over to watch the schooling session with his horse Nashua, because on the day of the big race, these horses are to be saddled in front of the stands on Washington Park's turf course, and it's important that these horses know what is expected of them and what will happen on that big day. So a sample saddling is taking place at the precise spot where it will happen on the day of the race. And Nashua, standing quietly until he's saddled, already shows some of the anxiety that is going through everyone as the day of the meeting approaches. And now Sonny Jim, with his son John Fitzsimmons, walks away from the saddling enclosure as Nashua is moved along the turf course to the gap in the rail that will take him on the main track, which on the 31st of August, 1955, will see him parade to the post for his meeting with Swaps. Nashua has been beaten only once in this year of 1955, and that by Swaps, pictured here going through the same schooling routine on the turf course. Swaps is a curious horse, and his alert, intelligent eyes scan the racetrack, looking all around, and now coming over to the rail, and one of the most unusual scenes racing has ever recorded, as Swaps is brought up to the crowd that jams around the rail, and they are permitted to pet the horse, and his docile and even temperament shows no alarm at anything that might seem strange. And now the easy gallop for Swaps, accompanied by a stable lead pony, and his schooling session has concluded. And now the day is at hand. Washington Park, truly the home of America's finest racing, brings the race of the century, Swaps versus Nashua. For this is Wednesday, August 31st, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, the racing fans were coming to Washington Park to get their vantage points and see the running of every step of the mile-and-a-quarter duel between Swaps and Nashua. They came by car, they came by train, they came by bus, they came by airplane, landing at the nearby airport just south of Washington Park. They came from all over America, from Cuba, from South America, from England, from Australia. Over 35,000 people gathering at Washington Park to watch this great event in American racing. Special souvenir programs were printed. Pictures of Swaps and Nashua, Swaps' owner, Rex Ellsworth, his trainer, Miss Tenney, William Woodward and Mrs. Woodward, owners of Nashua, and their grand trainer, Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons. From Wisconsin, from Florida, Ohio, California, Kentucky, Indiana, Louisiana, Wyoming, Iowa, Illinois, Maryland, every state of the 48 represented on the license plates of the thousands of cars in the huge parking lots at Washington Park. Lots so huge, they are serviced by buses provided by the racetrack management. But now the center of attraction are the principals in this great race. Their schooling is well rewarded as they stand quietly in front of the packed stands on the turf course being saddled for the great event. This is Swaps, and there is Willie Shoemaker, the young man who will be riding Swaps in this great test. Willie Shoemaker engaged in a head-and-head duel with Willie Hardtack for the nation's riding championship. And possibly the greatest of all jockeys, Eddie R. Carroll, sits astride Nashua as he's brought out on the track, closely followed by Willie Shoemaker and Swaps. Now the expectant hush falls over the crowd as up the track, a quarter of a mile from the finish line, the starting gate. An open stall between them, and they're off. Swaps veers out of the starting gate to the right, but Eddie R. Carroll goes immediately to work on Nashua, and after flailing that horse with his whip, he provides the first big surprise of the race, stealing the lead from Swaps, who was expected by all to be first out of the gate. And so Eddie R. Carroll on Nashua has control of the race as they go to the turn. The track is slightly off, but there are drier paths on the track, and our Carroll steers Nashua to one of these drier paths, keeping Swap's left upon him, forcing the California champion to run a farther distance by keeping him well to the outside. And as they round the turn and start into the backstretch, Swaps makes his first move as Willie Shoemaker tries to come up on even terms with our Carroll in Nashua, but Eddie, looking over his shoulder, digs in with his heels and keeps that margin at a half a length. They raced the first half mile in 46 seconds flat. Now as they go to the far turn, with Nashua still well out from the rail and keeping Swap still further out, they are approaching a 6 furlong mark, which will be negotiated in 1:10 2/5. Now as they go to the turn, our Carroll lets loose with Nashua and makes a sudden quick move and up a length and a half, the longest margin in the race. Willie Shoemaker digs in on Swaps and tries to close the gap. And slowly, Swaps gains ground on Nashua. They're halfway around the turn, and Swaps has reduced the margin once again to a half a length. Here they come around the final bend and into the home stretch. Still keeping well out from the rail on the dry footing, our Carroll goes to the bat on Nashua. And Willie Shoemaker asks the big question of Swaps. Flailing with the whip, Swaps tries gamely, but today he hasn't got it. During this race, Swaps injured a forefoot, and now he swerves, as though he is hurting, as they come down the final stages of the race. And it's Eddie R. Carroll now drawing away on Nashua. Nashua opens up 3 lengths. Now it's 5. And as they come to the finish line, Eddie keeps Nashua about his business with a couple of whacks of the whip and goes under the wire to win by 6.5 lengths. And he has won the race of the century as a jubilant Eddie R. Carroll guides William Woodard's fine champion back to the winner's circle. Nashua is brought to the winner's enclosure, and his owner, William Woodard Jr., takes the lead and brings the horse into the point where the blanket of flowers will be tossed over his withers and a large blue ribbon indicative of first place to be hung on that blanket. Both horses are led into the winner's enclosure, for these are true fine champions of the American turf. And today, it was Eddie R. Carroll and Nashua, the better of the two. Our Carroll receiving congratulations from all quarters in the winner's circle. Flashbulbs are popping. Mr. and Mrs. Woodard, of course, extremely happy. And Mr. Woodard expressing his feelings on the race to millions of fans across the country watching on television. Illinois' Governor William Stratton standing next to Willie Shoemaker. He will present the trophy. Screen star Margaret O'Brien, mascot of Swap, standing between Rex Ellsworth and Shoemaker. Then Eddie R. Carroll, William Woodard Jr., the lovely Mrs. Woodard, and Governor Stratton. And so, this great race has come to its end with Nashua the winner.